Another major storm system is set to impact the United States over the next few days, with more significant severe weather ahead, including numerous to widespread damaging winds, very large hail, and tornadoes. So in today's forecast, we are going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next 7 days. And we'll begin with what's happening across the country today, and we are coming off of a big severe weather event that happened yesterday back across parts of the central and southern plains. We had a bunch of tornadoes happen out of a singular supercell back over New Mexico, and that even went to Lubbock, where we had multiple tornadoes in a 1-mile wide wedge outside of Morton, Texas. Now, this storm system is beginning to weaken somewhat. We still have a line of storms out there this morning pushing across parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. That line of storms will actually move into the Ohio Valley later today with additional severe weather, and then more severe weather will ramp up right again back over in the high plains today. It's basically Groundhog Day, where more supercells are possible, with significant damaging winds, hail, and tornadoes all being a possibility. And in case you missed our live stream yesterday, this was a huge tornado that happened outside of Morton, Texas. We don't exactly know what the magnitude of this tornado was or how large it was, but it was likely around a mile wide, and this was from storm chaser Freddie McKinney. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is Friday, and we have two enhanced risks of severe weather in place, one of which is in Colorado and Kansas, and another one in New Mexico and Texas. Large slight risk of severe weather also extends from the high plains back into the Ohio Valley, and then the marginal threat of severe weather goes all the way back up into the Northeast. All hazards of severe weather are going to be on the table today, and basically today is Groundhog Day. It is very similar to what we just saw yesterday in terms of severe weather. Damaging winds is one of the concerns, where scattered damaging winds will be possible across the board in the Ohio Valley and the southern plains. Large to very large hail is also a big concern, mainly back over in the high plains, where we could see hailstones as large as the size of softballs today, which, for the record, we saw softball-sized hail yesterday out of those storms that happened back over in the Texas Panhandle, and that may happen again even a slightly further back off to the west. And then our tornado threat for today for now is a large 5% tornado risk, which encompasses southeastern Colorado, western Texas, and also back into southwestern Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandle. Once again, I would not be surprised if the Storm Prediction Center goes ahead and issues a 10% hatch tornado threat, just like yesterday, perhaps in the same area. We might even see one back up into parts of Colorado and even southwest Kansas, depending on confidence with our storm mode for today. So definitely make sure that you're staying weather aware. Additionally, there's an isolated chance for a tornado or two as far east as Kentucky and Tennessee. This will be mainly a morning risk, but it could continue into the early to mid-afternoon hours. Most of the tornado threat will be done in these areas by around 6 o'clock this evening. And then as we go into Saturday, the threat of severe weather will continue to shift further to the east, where we have a massive slight risk of severe weather in place from the Ozarks and even the southern plains like Texas and Oklahoma all the way back to the east coast, and a marginal threat that goes from New Jersey and Maryland all the way back over into New Mexico, where once again all hazards of severe weather will be on the table, but confidence is a little bit lower for exactly where the most significant threat of severe weather will reside. But I do think damaging winds will be the main concern across the board. This should be relatively scattered, with damaging winds between 60 to 70 miles per hour. Large hail is also a concern. I think the greatest threat of this will be right around Dallas-Fort Worth and also in southern Oklahoma. And on top of that, there will be a potential for a few tornadoes, and the majority of this tornado threat will be across parts of the Ozarks, also back into Texas, and even into the Ohio Valley, where a few tornadoes will be possible. And then on Sunday, the threat of severe weather is going absolutely nowhere. We have another level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk of severe weather in place across parts of Texas and Oklahoma. Two slight risks of severe weather, one in the central and southern plains and another one along the east coast, and then a marginal threat that encompasses basically almost all the Ohio Valley and back into the plains, where all hazards of severe weather will be on the table, but scattered to numerous damaging winds and very large hail are expected to be the main concerns in both regions. There will be a potential for tornadoes. At this time, it remains uncertain how significant our tornado threat will be, but we may see a few tornadoes, especially back over in Texas and Oklahoma. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. It is going to be a very active stretch of weather, and we are going to see even more severe weather beyond Sunday across the country that'll likely still be across large areas. Now, over the next 24 to 48 hours, we are expecting once again an elevated tornado threat across the central and southern plains, and it's very reminiscent of what we just saw yesterday. Our significant tornado parameter values are going to be relatively high, and where our storms initiate will be back over here in parts of Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and also the Oklahoma Panhandles, where we will have a lot of wind shear and a lot of instability, which should lead to a primed environment for tornadoes as long as we see discrete supercells, which I think we're at least going to have 2 or 3 today. Maybe not nearly as many as yesterday, but we should still see at least a few that are able to produce the potential for tornadoes. That environment stays favorable even into the late late evening, but I think by the late evening, we're not really going to have muddy storms left that are able to produce tornadoes. And then as we go into Saturday, our environment is still going to be somewhat favorable, especially back over here in parts of North Texas, where we may get a supercell or two near a boundary that could lead to a tornado or two back over in parts of Central and North Texas in extreme southern Oklahoma. And a slightly more elevated tornado threat may exist as well near the Mississippi River Valley, but by no means am I expecting much more than just a couple, maybe a few tornadoes in either region for Saturday. So here's the timing for severe weather today. We already have a line of thunderstorms out there this morning. This will be weakening as it moves across parts of Arkansas and as well as Missouri. And then by the early afternoon, it will re-intensify in the Ohio Valley, which we'll talk more about here in just a moment. And then by around 3 to 4 o'clock, we're going to start to see supercells firing off here across southeastern Colorado, and then a few back over in Texas, which we'll go more in detail about here in just a moment. By around 4 to 5 o'clock, notice how those supercells attempt to organize here across parts of Colorado, and we may see another one try to form behind the first one by around 6 to 7 o'clock in southeastern Colorado. And again, any supercells will be able to produce the potential for very large hail and maybe even a tornado or two. And if a tornado does happen, a strong or even large tornado would be in play, similar to what we just saw yesterday. And then by 8 to 9 o'clock, we'll likely continue to see a storm or two out there. And then by around 11 to 12 o'clock, those storms should start to weaken when it comes to the tornado threat, but our wind and hail threat will actually be increasing during the overnight hours, where a line of thunderstorms appears likely as we go into Saturday morning, and then that would eventually move into parts of the Ohio Valley and the Dixie Alley. This is what it looks like across the southern plains. By around 3 to 4 o'clock, we are anticipating supercells to begin firing up around Lubbock, Texas, basically where they were yesterday. I think we'll have 1 or 2 supercells out there today. Right behind our 1 or 2 supercells will be a cluster of storms, which basically the discrete supercell will have to be faster than the line for this to actually maintain a tornado threat. But generally speaking, I think we're gonna have a tornado threat from about 3 until about 8 o'clock today here across the Texas Panhandle before this becomes a cluster of storms, mainly with damaging winds, a little bit of hail, and maybe an isolated tornado. And then into the overnight hours, the storms weaken as they approach Dallas-Fort Worth, and then maybe a few more storms as we go into Saturday morning. And then eventually by Saturday afternoon, more supercells are going to fire off here across parts of Texas, where all hazards of severe weather will be on the table, but I do think large hail is going to be the main concern. Maybe an isolated tornado if a storm's able to ride along an outflow boundary. It'll be a relatively short-lived threat, probably only a few hours long, and again, mainly hail here across this region, North Texas and also Central Texas. And then back off to the east in the Ohio Valley, we are expecting an active day of showers and thunderstorms. We'll have storms rolling into St. Louis and also into southern Illinois just after lunchtime today, with damaging winds as the main concern. Maybe an isolated tornado or two here with this line as it moves across parts of western Kentucky and also southern Indiana. And then there may be a supercell or two here across parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, or even southeast Missouri that even produce an isolated tornado during the mid to late afternoon hours. And then eventually into the early evening hours, there will still be some storms out there in central Tennessee. But I think generally speaking, the biggest concern will just be damaging winds by that point, maybe an isolated tornado before those storms weaken as they approach the Appalachian Mountains. And then on Saturday, more storms are expected during the morning and early afternoon here across parts of the Ohio Valley and the Dixie Alley, but primarily across the Dixie Alley, where damaging winds will be the biggest concern, and an isolated tornado or two will be a possibility as those storms roll across parts of Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi during the afternoon. And then going into the evening hours, really not a whole lot of a severe weather threat is expected, but maybe an isolated severe storm during the late afternoon and early evening in the lower Midwest and also in the lower Ohio Valley. And then on Sunday, we could be talking about some really big hailstorms here across parts of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Right now, the RRFS model is indicating that we could see multiple supercells during the mid to late afternoon and early evening here across Texas, where all hazards of severe weather would be on the table, especially with these initial supercells, and then it would turn into more of a wind threat as we go into the evening, and we could even have a mesoscale convective system develop out of this across parts of the southern plains with all hazards on the table still. And then as we go into Monday morning, that line of storms would eventually push towards the Mississippi River, where a continuation of severe weather would be likely back over in the Dixie Alley, and we are likely going to see even more supercells on Monday, basically in the southern plains again. And so as we've talked about a lot here throughout this video and other videos, it is going to be a very active stretch of severe weather over the next 7 to 10 days. Make sure that you're staying weather aware. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We'll keep you posted with the latest on all these crazy severe weather events that'll be happening. I really do not see much of an end in sight to this active weather pattern anytime soon, even in the southern plains. I think we're going to see plenty more severe weather here over the next couple of weeks. And then beyond Sunday, the severe weather threat will continue across the United States. On Monday, we are expecting scattered severe weather to be a possibility from the southern plains back into the southeast. On Tuesday, severe weather still possible here across the southern plains and the Gulf Coast. And then on Wednesday, we should have a high pressure system that should push a lot of our moisture back down further to the south, which should prevent at least some more of that significant severe weather from happening. And I do think there will be at least a quiet day or two at some point next week where we're not going to see significant severe weather, probably around Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then by next weekend, things start to become a lot more uncertain, but we may see a trough eject over the Rocky Mountains, which could lead to a more organized threat of severe weather, especially in the central and northern plains and maybe back into the Midwest. And then beyond that, things become very uncertain beyond June 15th. But it is expected to be a pretty active weather pattern here over the next 7 to 10 days. Make sure you're staying tuned to the channel. Make sure you're subscribed down below. We'll keep you posted with the latest and all the crazy weather that'll be happening across the country. And as always, thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We'll likely be live later today with severe weather coverage, so make sure you click the bell icon down below so you're notified when we do go live. And we'll likely also have a video tomorrow, but if not, we'll probably be live at some point tomorrow if severe weather is significant enough. Just stay tuned, and we'll see you guys all again in the next forecast or live stream.